I'm Darren Kitchen, this is Land Turtle Basics, and today we are talking about SSH and how to maintain a shell on our land turtle. So you should be familiar with SSH by now. It's what you've been using to maintain your land turtles thus far, but for all of these examples so far, we have been directly connected to our land turtle over USB and thus over Ethernet and having a connection. And as you can see here from our previous examples, I have a little Windows virtual machine and a little Linux virtual machine, and I'm using PuTTY to go ahead and SSH into that. And that's fantastic, but I want to be able to have access to my land turtle and thus all of the other nodes that it's able to see no matter where it is deployed. So that's the idea behind this. Is what we're going to do is we're going to set up our AutoSSH to connect back to a server that we have in the cloud so that no matter where I am, I always have access to the land turtle and of course every asset that's connected to that LAN. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Under modules, I'll want to go ahead and start up AutoSSH. So AutoSSH, what this is going to do is allow us to configure a little bit of remote and local port forwarding. And what this is going to make happen is that the local port 22, the port 22 that is on the land turtle, will be accessible from port 2222 on our remote machine through a tunnel, which is pretty cool. The auto in AutoSSH is just a front end to SSH that maintains that connection. It keeps it persistent. It does a little keep alive, and if anything goes down, it auto restarts it, because the last thing we want to do is deploy something somewhere and then not have access to it later on just because there was a little network hiccup. So let's go ahead and get started. For this, I have a little virtual private server in the cloud. I'm going to go ahead and copy this IP address and let's SSH into that server there in the cloud. I'm going to go ahead and create a new user on this this little virtual private server that I have here by doing add user, and I'm going to call it turtle. I'm going to go ahead and give it a password and give it name and all of that stuff and say yes, this information is correct. Great, now my turtle has a user, so I can go ahead and start setting up keys. So the AutoSSH module is going to rely on public-private key pairs being exchanged, and what that means is there's no way to, once you've deployed this, interact with your land turtle to have it type in the password that I had just set up on my epic little server here, happy bunny spider monkey kill kill kill. And to do that without having to type the password in, we're going to go ahead and set up private public RSA DSA key pairs. If you've been doing SSH for a while, you should be very familiar with it. Otherwise, we've made it very simple on the land turtle. So let's go ahead and generate those and copy them over, and you'll see how that works. So I will actually exit the AutoSSH configuration and come back to it once I've set up my keys. To manage my SSH keys, there's actually another module called Key Manager. Now, like some modules that only have a configuration, this can't be started or enabled or stopped or disabled. It's not going to do anything, but you can configure it, which will bring you with the option to go ahead and generate an SSH key pair. So let's go ahead and do that. And we already have an SSH key pair on here, but let's go ahead, for the fun of it, go ahead and create a new one. It does take a minute or so. There's not a whole lot of entropy on this tiny little device, but in just a moment we'll have a brand new key. Great, so we have our new key. Now the next part is to go ahead and copy that key to a remote host. So I'll go ahead and choose copy key. Now we're going to need a host. Now in this case, it's what was that IP address? It was 104 for my little VPS in the cloud here, 236.143.219. The port is 22, that's the default, and then the user in this case is going to be turtle. Go ahead and submit that. It says that it can't find it in the known host, so it will go ahead and add it as a known host. And there we go, and I can see here's, in fact, I can actually check this against the server and make sure that that looks correct. So that's been added. And then next it's going to copy the key, and it needs the password to the turtle account that I had just created over here. I'll go ahead and give it that. And there we go. We can actually now review and see that I have my SSH RSA keys set up. Great. So at this point, I can go ahead and choose back and go back over to AutoSSH. So from AutoSSH, I can configure and set it up for the user at the host. In this case, the user is turtle at, and again, 104.236.143.219. And I want to leave these default. Of course, there is help like theirs and many others. Go ahead and submit that, and you can see there's plenty of examples here of how this works. So with that submitted, let's go ahead and start this. Now you'll see that connection has been established. I can go ahead and hit OK to continue. I can go back, and I will notice that I have a check mark right there next to AutoSSH. Well, what does that mean over here? Well, I am now root at happy bunny spider monkey kill kill kill. If I now SSH as root, because remember the LAN turtle runs as root, at localhost tac p for port number 2222, what I'm actually doing is I'm not SSHing from my virtual private server back into itself normally on port 22 where I have my SSH server listening, but rather I'm going through that tunnel, through that port 2222, so it maps 2222 on this end and it maps 22 on that end. So once I've gone through the tunnel, where will I end up? Well, I should end up at my LAN turtle on port 22 with my SSH server welcoming me. Go ahead and issue this, and for the first time ever, it's saying, hey, well, you know, this is a new key fingerprint. Does it match? Yes, it does. I'll accept that, and now I'm asked for the password. I'm going to enter in my LAN turtle password, and look at that. Over SSH, I can now go ahead and edit my modules. I can go ahead and configure things to my liking. I can go back. I can exit. I am now through the cloud, through my SSH session, I now have access to this LAN. And what's really great about this is it's not just having access to the turtle shell and have the ability to configure my modules, but it's also that I am now poised in a position where I have the visibility onto that LAN the same as the LAN turtle, and I can access this from wherever I am. So if I now go off with my Android phone and pull up an SSH like ConnectBot, and I SSH into my little virtual private server, and from there SSH into localhost on port 2222, I can go ahead and log in as root to my LAN turtle and have access to the LAN that it's been deployed on from wherever, which is really cool. And building on the other concepts that we've talked about in the last session, we can set this up to be a enabled module, which will mean that this will happen every time it starts. And of course, there's much more amazing gymnastics that can be done with SSH as far as setting it up with the ability to, say, for instance, just SSH into my relay on port 2222 and have it bounce through there. There's amazing capabilities, but suffice it to say, now I have my LAN turtle all configured. I can go ahead and deploy this. In fact, it doesn't even have to be plugged into a machine. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. So I will exit this session back to my virtual private server. I'm going to go back into my AutoSSH, and I will go ahead and enable it. So now it's enabled on boot. And at this point, as before, I can go ahead and do the proper shutdown procedure, which is to just unplug it. And in this case, I'm not going to plug it back into the computer. I'll just use any old battery pack. In this case, I'm using a pineapple juice. And I will go ahead and plug that guy in there. And this will boot up. And in just a moment, I should be able to SSH back in, just as I had done before, and have access to my LAN turtle. And just like before, SSH to root at localhost, port 2222. Connection reset by peer. It hasn't made its connection yet. We'll wait just a moment and try it again. And in this case, I'm asked for my password. And now I have access to the turtle shell. And if you've been following along, you might imagine that I could do the inverse here and copy my keys over from the server to my LAN turtle so that I wouldn't be prompted for the password when I want to go ahead and log into it and manage it. All sorts of amazing possibilities with SSH, and we're going to go ahead and continue building on these with the future segments here that you can find over at lanturtle.com.